There's something strange about watching someone you love slowly slip away from you, piece by piece, like sand through your fingers. At first, I thought it was just a phase. Maybe we were both getting older, or maybe I'd let work and life get in the way. But when I noticed the little things, like the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes anymore, or how she started leaving the house for errands that seemed to take longer and longer, I couldn't ignore it any longer that I started questioning, doubting that IT wasn't just the distance. It was the silence that had crept in between us. The way she'd pick up her phone and immediately turn it face down when I walked into the room. The subtle shift in her demeanor when I touched her. I'd never been a jealous person. I'd never had a reason to be. But suddenly I felt unsettled, unhinged. And that's when I started wondering, was she seeing someone else? At first, I tried to shake it off. I told myself I was overthinking things. But then came that night, late, around 11 p.m. She had been texting, her fingers moving quickly across the screen, a smile tugging at her lips. The same smile she used to give me when we were still in the early stages of our relationship. It was like a switch had been flipped that I didn't want to be the guy who checked his partner's phone. I wasn't that insecure. But when I saw the name, David, pop up on her screen, something in me broke. I knew a David. He was an old college friend, someone I had met a few times, but I'd never thought much of him. Not until now that I told myself it was nothing. Maybe it was just friendly catching up. But when she excused herself to take a call in another room, my curiosity got the best of me. I tried to push the doubt out of my mind, but it clung to me like a shadow. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for. Proof, maybe something I could use to confront her. So I did something I had never done before. I called up Nick, an old buddy of mine from college, the kind of guy who always had his finger on the pulse of what was happening around town. He had connections, and I knew if there was something going on with Claire, he could find out AT first. Nick was hesitant. He wasn't the type to get involved in relationship drama, but I convinced him. I told him I just needed him to keep an eye on things. Just make sure she's okay, I said, masking my desperation with a smile. He agreed that I didn't think much of it first, but when Nick started texting me a few days later, nothing major, just subtle updates, my gut twisted with anxiety. She had been meeting David more than I realized. Coffee dates, long talks in the park, late night walks. Nothing overtly suspicious, but it was more than I had expected. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was definitely going on. And that's when I realized something terrifying, that I wasn't just jealous. I was already losing her, and I couldn't figure out how to stop it. Nick told me something else that week, something that twisted the knife even further. Claire had been talking about how complicated things had gotten between us, how she felt unseen. She said she missed the early days of their friendship, the way things were easy and uncomplicated before life got messy. That I didn't know if that was a sign of infidelity, but I knew one thing. I was going to find out. I had to, if only so I could stop torturing myself with the what-ifs.so. I made a decision. A risky one. I called David. I didn't know what I expected from the conversation. Maybe I thought he'd slip up, give me some confession. Maybe I thought I could be so smooth, so clever, that I could expose whatever was happening between them without anyone suspecting anything. But when David picked up, his voice was calm, polite. We exchanged pleasantries before I got to the point. "Listen, man," I said, trying to keep my tone casual. "I know you've been hanging out with Claire lately. I just wanted to ask, what's going on with you two?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and for a second, I thought he was going to deny it, brush me off, but then he said something that I will never forget. "We're friends, Ryan. But I'll tell you this, Claire is a great woman. She's been through a lot with you. She deserves better." I froze. His words hit me like a punch in the gut. But they weren't the words of a man who was having an affair. They were the words of a man who was stepping back, who saw something I didn't want to see. I hung up the phone, a sinking feeling in my chest. Claire came home later that evening, the same smile on her lips. The same smile that had haunted me for days. I couldn't bring myself to confront her right then. I was too broken, too confused. Instead, I spent the night pretending everything was fine. I watched her move around the kitchen, heard her hum as she made dinner, and tried to ignore the feeling in the pit of my stomach. The next morning, I found myself asking a question I hadn't considered before. Was I just imagining things? Was I letting my own insecurities ruin what we had? I didn't know anymore. But what I didn't know was this. If I wanted to save us, I couldn't rely on jealousy or manipulation. I needed to confront my fears, face them head on, without running from the truth. And that was the hardest part, realizing that sometimes jealousy doesn't come from the other person. Sometimes it comes from within. I didn't intend for it to go this F-A-R-D-I-T started out as a simple idea, a way to test her. I had no plans to make it real, no plans to get attached. But somewhere along the way, I lost control, and now I'm sitting here, trying to piece together what the hell happened. Her name is Claire. We've been married for 5 years, and we've always had this unspoken understanding. We trust each other, but we never ask too many questions. Our lives have been good. No, great, really. We're comfortable. We laugh a lot. We're those people who never argue in public, always present the polished version of ourselves. The kind of couple that everyone envies. But that's just it, isn't it? Polished. Perfect on the outside, but a mess underneath. Lately, I had begun to wonder if things were as smooth as they appeared. She'd been distant, nothing major, but enough to make me start questioning things. She'd come home late a few times, saying it was work. She'd leave her phone unattended, screen facing down. She'd smile when I kissed her, but it didn't feel real. Something was off. That I know. This is the part where most people would call me paranoid. But trust me, I've been in this relationship long enough to know the signs. A change in behavior is the first clue. And I wasn't about to let her think I couldn't see. I decided to play a little game. Not the smartest idea, I'll admit, but I was desperate to know if I was right. I met Rachel at a networking event. She was beautiful, impossibly so. A brunette with deep green eyes and a smile that felt like a secret. The kind of woman who made everyone else in the room feel like extras in her movie. She was perfect for the role that I told her about Claire. I told her I needed her help, that I had this plan to make my wife jealous. Nothing too extreme, just some innocent flirtation. Rachel was more than willing to help, amused by the idea. I could tell she saw this as a game, too. Over the next few weeks, Rachel and I exchanged texts, just the right balance of casual and flirtatious. I'd tell Claire about Rachel, the new co-worker I'd met, and I'd emphasize how much we had in common. It wasn't long before I noticed Claire starting to ask about her. She was curious, in a way that felt too genuine. She wanted to know details about Rachel, how I'd met her, what we talked about. And then, one day it happened. The opening. You know, she said over dinner, her eyes flicking to the side. I was thinking about what you said. About Rachel. I'm glad you're meeting new people at work. You deserve to have friends outside of us, right? Her voice was too soft, too careful. It was the kind of voice she used when she was hiding something. That was the moment I knew. I had her right where I wanted her, but I didn't tell her how Rachel and I had been texting late into the night. I didn't tell her how I'd been savoring the messages, the little hints of attraction. Instead, I played the part of the oblivious husband. I smiled, reassured her that everything was fine and that it was nothing more than a harmless connection. But she wasn't convinced. The next week, Claire came home early from work. She didn't tell me she was coming back, just showed up. And I wasn't expecting it. I was sitting on the couch, texting Rachel again, just as I'd done every night for the past week. Claire froze when she saw my phone. She didn't say anything, but her eyes, there was something in them that made me feel like I had been caught. It was a moment of truth, a chance for me to come clean, to explain. But I didn't. I let her look at my screen, let the silence stretch on. You're talking to her again, Claire said quietly, her voice breaking just a little. Rachel, you're flirting with her. I stayed still. I couldn't move. The lie hung in the air between us like a toxic gas, but I let it settle. The only sound was the steady beat of her breathing as she waited for me to respond. Finally, I said, she's just a friend. The words fell hollow, even to me. But Claire didn't challenge me. She didn't press. Instead, she just nodded slowly and walked away. No argument. No shouting. Nothing. That's when I realized something, that I wasn't the one being tested anymore. I didn't understand it then. But looking back, I see it clearly now. She knew what was happening. Claire had always known. She wasn't as innocent as I thought. She'd been playing her own game, just like me. And somehow, she was already a few steps ahead. The next few days were tense. Claire was quieter than usual, but she didn't bring up Rachel. It was as if everything had shifted, but no one was willing to say it out loud. I kept waiting for her to confront me, to ask more questions, but she never did. Instead, she seemed content. That's when I realized she was playing a different game, a more dangerous one. She wasn't jealous of Rachel. She wasn't even worried. She was just waiting for me to slip up. She was waiting for me to fall into my own trap. And sure enough, I did. A week later, Claire dropped the bombshell. "I know what you're doing, Ryan," she said one evening, the calm in her voice almost unnerving. "I know about Rachel, and I know what you've been trying to do." I froze. "What do you mean?" She smiled then, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile someone gives you when they know something you don't. "I know you're trying to make me jealous," she said softly. "I know you're testing me. But the thing is, I don't need to prove anything to you. I trust you, Ryan. But it's not the same for you, is it?" And just like that, everything I had set up, everything I thought I knew about her, came crashing down. Claire had never been the naive one in this marriage. She wasn't the victim of my little test. She was the one who had been observing me, seeing if I would crack. In the end, I wasn't sure whether to feel ashamed or impressed. But one thing was clear. The game was over. She knew my secret, and somehow, she had always known. I found out about her secret on a lazy Wednesday evening, just a few minutes before I was supposed to leave for my usual 8 p.m. meeting with friends. I've been lying on the couch, scrolling mindlessly through my phone. She was in the other room, talking to her mom, laughing that way she did when she didn't know I was listening. I could hear the faint sound of her voice as she moved between rooms, but it was the stillness of my phone that caught my attention. There was a notification from Instagram, a message, but not just any message. It was from a guy named Sam, a name I didn't recognize. A quick scan through his profile confirmed he was some random, faceless figure. But the message itself was what did it for me. "Hey, I know it's been a while. Miss you. Still thinking about that night we spent together. Can't stop wondering what you're doing now." I didn't react at first. What was I supposed to do with it? She had told me about Sam, a guy she met at a bar when we were still in our early 20s. She said they'd exchanged a few messages, nothing more. But this was something else. It wasn't just a flirtation. It was a thread woven in the quiet corners of her life without me knowing that I clicked on his profile again, digging through the photos. Nothing too revealing, but there was a sense of intimacy there, a shared history that I wasn't part of. I wanted to reach out to him, to scream through the screen, but what good would that do? He wasn't the problem. It wasn't the first time I had felt this creeping suspicion. There had always been something off about her late-night texts, the odd smile she would give when her phone buzzed in her pocket, the way she would sometimes lock her phone screen whenever I was near. But I ignored it, trusted her like a fool. So I closed the app, shoved my phone into my jacket pocket, and went to meet my friends, acting like everything was fine. But my mind wasn't there that I spent the night thinking. The more I thought about it, the more questions I had. What was going on? How long had this been happening? The worst part? I didn't feel anger. I felt disappointment. It was the cold kind of betrayal, the kind that doesn't come with shouting or fights, but with a quiet realization that everything you thought you knew about your relationship was a lie. The next morning, I wasn't sure what to do. I could confront her, demand the truth, but I had already made up my mind about that. I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want her to see me as the jealous husband. No, I would handle this differently. It was time to test her, to put her to the test that I spent the whole day plotting. I couldn't just come out and accuse her. It would only make me look insecure. No, I needed something clever, something subtle. That evening, I dropped a bait. I mentioned a new friend I'd met online, a woman named Rachel, a coworker who had been talking to me a lot about our shared interests in music and movies. I told her Rachel had sent me a few pictures, nothing crazy, just concert tickets she thought I might be interested in. I could see her reaction, too quick, too defensive. Her eyes flicked down at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. I waited. Later that night, as we were brushing our teeth, she finally spoke. "How's Rachel? You two seem to be talking a lot." I didn't respond immediately. I just looked at her in the mirror. She could feel the weight of my silence. "You're jealous, aren't you?" she continued, but her tone had shifted. There was something almost defensive in it. She knew I was testing her, and that scared me more than the infidelity itself. But I didn't show any of that. I shrugged. I don't know. She's just a friend. The next few days were strange. I didn't confront her about Sam directly. Instead, I waited for her to reveal herself, to slip up again. Each time she came home late from work or her phone buzzed during dinner, I watched her. Not in anger, but with a strange calmness. A detached curiosity, like an investigator looking at a crime scene, trying to piece together the puzzle without rushing to conclusions. But as the week wore on, her behavior only became more erratic. She started picking fights over trivial things. She started acting busy at work, as if she needed to avoid me. And when we were alone, she'd mention nothing about Sam. Not a single word. That night, I finally decided it was time to force her hand, and I took my phone, opened up the message from Sam, and sent her a screenshot. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through Netflix, pretending not to notice me. I handed her the phone. Care to explain this? She froze, her face drained of color. For a second, I thought she might deny it, lie her way out. But she didn't. Instead, she said, almost too calmly, "It's nothing. Just some old guy who can't move on." Old guy, I repeated, my voice rising without meaning to. Is that really what this is? Some old guy? She shrugged. I didn't think it mattered. I stared at her, trying to decide if I felt more hurt or more betrayed. There was no point in continuing the conversation. The damage had been done. I didn't need to hear any more excuses. That night, she fell asleep with her back turned to me, and I lay awake. I thought about what I would do next, how I would handle it. The idea of confronting her directly, ending it all, didn't sit well with me. But what would sit well? I realized I'd already made up my mind. I wasn't going to let her walk away from this unscathed. I had a plan, one that would make sure she'd never forget the pain she'd caused. But I would do it my way, quietly, smartly. The truth would eventually come out, and when it did, she'd see how much of it was her own doing. The digital world may have been the catalyst, but it wasn't the real enemy. I'd always prided myself on being a patient man, but patience has its limits. We had been married for 8 years, and in all that time, I never once questioned her loyalty. Claire was the kind of woman who would never stray. At least, that's what I believed. But when you start noticing small, seemingly innocent details, like the way she stopped wearing her wedding ring for a week, or how she started getting work calls late at night, you can't help but wonder. Doubt creeps in, and once it has a hold on you, it grows. The tipping point came when I saw a message pop up on her phone. She was sitting across from me in the kitchen, casually scrolling through her emails when her phone buzzed. The name Erin flashed on the screen that I didn't think much of at first. But the way her face changed when she glanced at it, there was something there. Something I couldn't ignore. It wasn't the first time I'd seen that name, and it wasn't the first time I noticed the way her body stiffened when she got a text. I had to know more that I'd never been the kind of guy to snoop, but something shifted in me that day. I needed answers. I couldn't just sit around hoping it was all in my head. So I did what I had to do. I started following her. At first, it was casual, just picking up on where she went when she said she was going to the grocery store or staying late at work. But then I started noticing patterns. She was always meeting Erin for lunch or coffee. Always laughing, always relaxed. Something that wasn't happening when we were together. It took me 2 weeks to piece it all together. I watched them in the coffee shop one afternoon, sitting at a corner table, their faces close, voices low. I watched Claire touch his arm, laugh at something he said. It was all too familiar, too intimate. That's when I knew she was cheating on me. But it wasn't the infidelity that stung the most. It was the betrayal of trust. The way she had lied to my face day after day, pretending everything was fine while she was sneaking around behind my back. I had to do something about it. Something that would hurt her as much as she had hurt me, that I decided that if she was going to humiliate me, I would return the favor. But I wouldn't do it quietly. I wouldn't let her off easy. She deserved to feel the weight of her actions, to know what it felt like to be exposed, to be judged in front of the people who mattered to her most. That I waited for the perfect moment. That moment came a week later at a work event, her company's annual charity gala. She had been planning it for months, and I could see how excited she was to go. What she didn't know was that I had a plan that I arranged for Erin to be at the event. I knew Claire wouldn't be able to resist him. After all, it had been their little affair for months. The tension between them was palpable, and I was going to make sure everyone in that room knew about it. That I'd always been good with people, charming, persuasive. So I made sure to strike up a conversation with the right people, plant a few seeds of doubt here and there. Nothing too obvious, just enough to stir curiosity, to make people wonder why Claire and Aaron were always so close. The gala was held in a large ballroom, filled with colleagues, clients, and friends. Claire was radiant in her black dress, her eyes sparkling with excitement. She hadn't noticed me yet, and that's when I made my move. I watched her approach Aaron from across the room, her laughter filling the air as she reached out to touch his arm. Without hesitation, I walked toward them. I could see the confusion in Claire's eyes when she spotted me, but I didn't care that I stood there for a moment, letting the silence stretch out until everyone around us started to notice. "How's the affair going, Claire?" I asked, my voice louder than I intended. But it didn't matter. It was exactly what I needed. The room went quiet, and everyone turned their heads toward us. Claire's face turned pale, and she tried to smile, to brush it off. But I wasn't done. "I guess you and Aaron have a lot to talk about, huh?" I continued, stepping closer, my gaze fixed on her. "Too bad you couldn't wait until the charity event was over to make it official." Aaron shifted uncomfortably, and I could see his eyes flicker between us. But Claire? She looked like she was about to collapse. I never seen her so exposed, so vulnerable. "Ryan, please." She started, but her voice cracked. She was trying to control the damage, trying to regain her composure, but it was too late. The damage had already been done. I didn't care about her excuses. I didn't care about her apologies. She had made her choice, and now everyone in that room knew about it. I wanted her to feel the weight of her betrayal, to understand the shame that comes when you're caught in your own lies. The looks from the people around us, friends, colleagues, clients, were enough to make her stumble. I watched her face flush with humiliation, and I felt a twisted satisfaction that I hadn't expected. "Good night, Claire," I said, turning away from her. There was no need for a dramatic exit. I'd already said everything that needed to be said. I walked out of the ballroom. I didn't feel like a winner. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt empty. What I had done wasn't going to fix anything. It wasn't going to erase the hurt or the betrayal, but it was the only thing I could do, because in the end, Claire had made it clear that our marriage wasn't worth fighting for. So I fought for my dignity, and in some strange, twisted way, that felt like enough.